Welcome to session 5 of day 1 of the ICC Sustainability Conclave 2021. We now move on to a session of CEO Speaks of Global Perspective, which will be chaired by Mr. Ravi Kapoor, Chairman Sustainability Committee, ICC, and MD Hoiback, Color India. And we have two very interesting panelists, along with Ravi Kapoor's company, Mr. Krishnaman Narayan, MD BASF India Limited, which is again has a European kind of headquartered company, of course a global company, and Mr. Adnan Ahmed, Regional Head India, Clarion Chemicals India Limited, once again a European-based headquartered company. So all three of you are from companies that are headquartered in Europe, and of course now the session is in your hands, Ravi.
Can't hear you, Ravi. I think you're on mute.
Okay, my bad. Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you, Mishraji. Thank you for the quick introduction. Seems to be a very Europe-centric introduction. And I would say that we have three of us here, and I would like to specially thank and welcome, Mr. Krishnaman Narayan, who's the MD of BASF. And I call it the chemical company. They call themselves, and I call it. I always joke with them. It's that small company in Ludwigshafen. So he represents the biggest chemical company. I think we are very happy to have him. And Mr. Adnan Ahmed, who's the regional head of India Clarion, also a small Swiss company. And I'm really the small company by that standard. So I think that it's great to have both of you. Thank you, gentlemen, for finding the time and coming here. What happens is that we need the support of everybody in a subject like sustainability, because as you all know, if it doesn't come from top down, it's always very difficult to implement, and it's a challenge in any case. And India has its own set of challenges. You can see that we have just come to about 68 members in the responsible care. The Nicer Globe program is going on. I think both of you are very supportive of this, and so very much appreciated, and ICC is grateful for all the effort that you do and for your time today. So to quickly introduce and get into just a brief introduction of Mr. Narayan. Krishnaman was born in 71. He holds a bachelor's degree. Apart from managing business, he is passionate about engaging with the next generation business managers and leaders, and hold your breath, as well as long distance running. This I didn't know. Very impressive. He's a marathon runner. He joined BASF Mumbai in January 95 and has held various senior positions since. He was appointed the managing director of BASF Limited and head BASF South Asia Mumbai in April of 2019. So with that, I would invite you to share your thoughts on sustainability, your companies, your personal, and also remember, I always use this example that when you had a Sunil Gavaskar, a Sachin and a Virat, that actually brought about a generation of cricketers who wanted to emulate them. So here is one of the exercises that we have that we would like examples from you, and also we would like to know your philosophy so that we get a generation of people who want to follow. With that, I give the mic to you.
Thanks, Mr. Ravi Kapoor. It's really a pleasure and honor to be here. You called us the chemical company, which used to be something, our tagline, maybe till about 6-7 years ago. So 7 years ago, in our part of our global strategic change, we reinvented ourselves in a number of ways. And one of them was also the tagline. The chemical company kind of disappeared. And we changed that to we create chemistry for a sustainable future. And why I state that is a lot of things have happened in the meanwhile over the last 6-7 years, where we orient ourselves as a company in terms of our strategic direction, in terms of our business models, in terms of our portfolio management, innovation, you name it. It's somehow cornered with the principles of sustainability. So sustainability is what we breathe, and we believe that sustainability is no more a choice, but it's essentially something that we have to be in sustainability as our cornerstone if we need to survive long term. I mean, we are a company that's over 150 years old, but if we need to survive over the next 40, 50 years, not just as a company, but also in our society, then there is no other option but to adopt sustainability in everything we do. So the organization per se is built on sustainability, and almost every action of ours is having sustainability at its core. Now, that said, what are we doing as a company? And as a company, I think starting with the products that we produce for our customers, or the solutions that we provide for the industry, we try to ensure that in terms of process, in terms of bringing it to the market, in terms of applications, at all these stages, that it is a much more sustainable product. It has a much better carbon footprint than its predecessors. So these are some of the founding philosophies on which we work. You also probably are aware that BSF as a company is one of the founding members of Alliance to End Plastic Waste. So plastic waste is a massive problem for the industry and for the planet. And here BSF, along with like-minded companies, came together and formed the alliance, which looks at various ways as to how you can reduce, recycle, and so on, and make sure that, you know, as a part of a concept like circular economy, how can we contribute to making this world a better place to live in? So I think chemistry and per se materials as part of chemistry provide us with a lot of scope to innovate, to create new business models, and make sure that the impact that we have on the environment and on the planet is reduced with each successive year. A couple of years ago, our CEO went public, and I think we were the first chemical company to do that, where we said that we would grow above the market for sure in the time frame until 2030, but we would do that more or less with a flat CO2 emission. Now, to grow 5-7% above the market with a flat CO2 emission, and especially coming from our footprint, which is what we call the Verbund, starting from the steam cracker deep down into application chemistries. So that's a huge challenge, and with this and steps as a company, whether it's our energy situation or whether it is our processes, our catalysts that we use. So a lot of work is going into these things, and I'm pleased to say, I mean, if you look at our history over the last 25 years, we have grown as a company significantly. However, our absolute emissions have declined to almost about 50% of what they used to be in the early mid-90s. So if you talk specific per ton emissions, this is a dramatic reduction that has been achieved by BSF. And this has been achieved through process innovation, through new technologies, and also replacing certain products which had a higher footprint than others. So you know, as a combination of all this, and the way BSF measures it, we measures all three scopes. So our raw materials, our own production processes, and how we supply to our customers. So when you sum all three scopes together, we measure this. And last year, our CEO again went public by saying that, you know, we are a transparent company, and by the end of 2021, the product carbon footprint of all our products will be up there public for all our customers to see, and for industry to see what are we doing and how are we improving this over time. So I think as a company, we firmly believe in this. And being part of the leadership, I personally believe in this, in this context, that BSF as a company has a huge role to play in this context, and we will continue to do so. And now coming to the last aspect which I would like to cover is BSF in India. So in India too, I mean, we don't have the big Ludwigshafen site, Ravi, that you talked about, but we do have a couple of small sites in Dahej and Mangalore, and some other smaller sites in our non-listed companies, where I think the standards that we use and the materials that we use and the processes that we use are exactly the same as anywhere in the world. This means that any product of mine, whether you take it from our site in Dahej or you take it from our site in Germany, will possibly have the same emissions and the quality as we have in anywhere else in the world. Of course, what you have as raw material supplies, again, we take point to make sure that our raw material suppliers are also working with us in ensuring that we have the right products and the right footprints. So I think it's a holistic steering that we do on our product portfolio and our manufacturing processes. And personally, I see that, I mean, a number of companies and brands, for that matter, who are in the consumer space see a value in this, and then you see a certain possibility that in the longer term the industry has to catch up to these international standards if you want to do business internationally. And I think that's the crux of our Atmanirbhar Bharat situation as well, where we want to have manufacturing not just for India, but we want to be part of the competitive global landscape. And I think having a sustainability policy in line with what these customers or brands want eventually is not an option. It's a basic need that we need to be part of that. Maybe, Ravi, that's a very long opening statement. I would say I pass it back to you.
I appreciate that. What I would like you to do that, and just to set the context, I think there is very little doubt that BSF would be quite up there with their their policies on sustainability. What we would like to, and maybe I'll go to Adnan, but if you can then in the second round come back with at least what would be your advice, because it's also that BSF and you almost are obligated, being in India, to also emancipate the other industries, whether they are suppliers of yours or even the other chemical industry, as almost like a CSR activity. As to what do you think that they should do, what can they do, what they should do, and knowing that and having your Indian roots, I think we know our country very well, and who can better advise if you have your legs on both sides of being in a large MNC and being in a very qualified MNC. So this is something if you can reflect on, and I'll go to Adnan, introduce him quickly and get his thoughts on that. Yeah. So pleasure to welcome Adnan Ahmed, old friend, and also very helpful to ICC and always there for us. And Adnan has over 32 years of industry experience across all sectors and continents. Began his career with ICI, followed by BP, and is now with Clariant. He holds a master's degree. He holds it in chemical engineering from Queen's University, Canada. He received a National Energy Conservation Award from the Indian Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, in 2004. He has also been conferred with the Helios Award for Human Energy by Lord Brown. And this is for leading transformational change in road safety for Castrol. So very interesting achievements there, Adnan. I didn't even know about it. Nice to read about it. So would you care to share a little bit, what you have been doing and with all your experience of the past and also of the present? Yeah.
Thank you, Ravi. So thank you for inviting me to speak at the ICC Sustainability Conclave 2021. In fact, when Kumaresh Mishra ji first mentioned this to me, it was a no-brainer for me. I was absolutely delighted to join. And when I was told that, Mohan from BSF and Ravi yourself were going to be part of it, then obviously that was a great honor for me to be a part of that group. So thank you for inviting me. Just one small correction when you talked about us being European companies, and we are actually Indian companies. And I think Mohan's company, BSF India, is Indian. Your company, Hoybach in India, is Indian. And Clariant India is very much an Indian company, managed by Indians, run by Indians. The only thing is that we have a parent group which is probably overseas. But as companies, like a lot of other multinationals in India, we're very much Indian companies. And you're absolutely right. We are very interested to see that, whatever are the latest trends that are happening globally are brought into India as soon as possible to make us more competitive. Sustainability being probably one of them. So sustainability is, and it will continue to be, a key competitive differentiator. for some time to come. And those of us who understand it better will get a head start. And we'll be able to compete more. We'll get a head start in this industry for the future. So I certainly hope that the Indian chemical industry takes note of this quickly and starts to invest in sustainability. I don't believe that we have a choice. I also don't see sustainability as a luxury. It's now essential, and it's the cost of doing business. Just as we invest in people, we invest in assets, in technology, we must include sustainability at every stage. I propose to share with you what the thoughts of at Clariant are, and so on, and more broadly what the world is doing about sustainability. And then at the end, maybe I'll try and answer some of the questions you asked me. So very quickly about Clariant, it's a focused, sustainable and innovative specialty chemical company based in Basel, Switzerland. It's one of the world's leading specialty chemical companies, and it contributes to value creation with innovative and sustainable solutions for customers and from many industries. Our portfolio is designed to meet very specific needs with as much precision as possible. And at the same time, our R&D is focused on addressing key trends of our time. And these include energy efficiency, renewable raw materials, emission-free mobility, and conserving finite resources. So Clariant reports in 3 business areas: care chemicals, natural resources, and catalysis. And for all of them, we have the same strategy, a 5-pillar strategy, which is focus on innovation and R&D, add value with sustainability, reposition our portfolio, intensify growth, and increase profitability. So that's all I'm going to say about Clariant. But the important thing is I use the word sustainability repeatedly in that, right? It just tells you, and I'm sure if Mohan did that for BSF, and if you did that for Heubach, it would be a similar thing. So that is first learning for us, for companies in India. Can we truly, when we describe our company, use the word sustainability repeatedly? So let me focus on the subject at hand, sustainability, and what it should mean for the Indian chemical industry. Unfortunately, India has been a laggard when it comes to sustainability. And just as it was with safety and the environment, but there's been big strides we've taken on environment and in safety, big strides. But we still have a long way to go to compete on sustainability with our global peers. And I'm particularly keen on talking about this because going forward, competitiveness and sustainability will be synonymous in the Indian chemical industry. It is inevitable. It will happen. It's already happened in Europe. So we must be cognizant of what is happening around us so that we don't get left behind when change sweeps across our industry, as it no doubt will. So speaking on sustainability, let me start with Europe, which is leading the rest of the world in this area. Europe aims to be the first climate neutral continent by 2050, with a target of 60% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions compared to 1990. That's a huge step forward. And the chemical strategy for sustainability, it's called CSS, which was adopted in December 2019 by the EU, is the most comprehensive revision of legislation affecting this chemical industry. It is going to come our way. So we must try and find out what this is all about. The third thing is, it's expected that over 50 legislative initiatives will be passed until 2023, regulating the chemical industry, mainly for the EU. And this will impact imports into Europe as well, which impacts all of us. In India, we do Atmanirbhar Bharat. We want to supply the world. We want to supply Europe as well. Investors are committing to shifting portfolios and will invest in line with the Paris Agreement. So industry majors across the globe are making bold statements on climate neutrality. You heard something from Mohan as well for BSF, similar statements from Clariant, and so on and so forth. And as I said earlier, Europe is leading the world in this sphere. What is being followed in Europe today, it will come definitely to our neighborhoods in the years to come. So we've got to ready ourselves. So let's talk about some specifics. There is something called SBTI, Science-Based Target Initiative, and it's rapidly gaining certainly in Europe and globally, over 1,000 and global this, with commitments in at least 5 years, over the last 5 years, with big commitments. And it includes most large FMCG companies. Over 350 companies joined SBTI in 2019, another 411 in 2020, and the numbers are just continuously growing. Customers of our industries, the spec chem industry, are bold in their commitments. They're reflecting science-based targets and climate neutrality. So Procter & Gamble, we all know Procter & Gamble, they've committed to a 50% reduction of scope 1 and 2 emissions by 2030. Unilever commits to a 50% reduction of emissions related to their products by 2030. Apple commits to a 100% scope 3 reduction by 2030. So what does this mean? So this is what we need to understand. We need to know what is scope 1, what is scope 2, what is scope 3. That will tell you the gravity of commitments that are being made. So let me just very briefly tell you. Scope 1 is related to greenhouse gases generated by our own operations. This is generated by operational inefficiencies, moving things around within the battery limits, waste gases, liquids generated by process, and so on. This amounts to about 10% of the total greenhouse gases. This is just an example, 10% roughly. Scope 2 is another 10%. This is about the energy that we purchase and how we use that energy. So the more you purchase, the higher the greenhouse gas emissions from that. So it impacts about 10%. The remaining 80% is scope 3. And scope 3 is made up of a few parts. The biggest part of it is raw material and other energy related activities. So that is 60%, the raw material part. So people are, if they want to reduce their scope 3, it's going to be very important who they buy their materials from, which is going to be you and me, a lot of us sitting in the room, chemical industry, right? So raw materials and other, this is about 60%. In collaboration with suppliers using recycled materials and all will help you impact that. The second one, as part of scope 3, is transportation and distribution. So where you get your material from, right? This is amounts to about 5%. So what I've got to be able to convince a buyer in the US is the 5% he's spending on transportation and distribution is not big enough because I'm going to impact the other 60% from the raw material part, right? So understand that. The third part is downstream transportation. So for my product, when I make my product and I sell it to whoever I sell it to, that's another 5%. And then the end of life disposal, is another 10%. So that makes up the total greenhouse gas emissions, right? Just understand that. So armed with this knowledge, we can see how significant the commitments of the big global customers of our industry are. I told you P&G committing to 50% reduction in scope 1 and 2 emissions. Remember, I told you it's roughly 20% of the total for a chemical company. And Apple committing to 100% of scope 3. So huge changes coming our way. So these are commitments that are in the public domain. So it's serious stuff. And as you can see, to be competitive, sustainability will play a very key role. And the entire industry in India will have to think differently. Sustainability, including our environmental and safety performance, can't be dependent on government regulation. We have to self-regulate. We have to set internal targets. We have to commit them to the markets, to our investors, to customers, and we have to deliver to them. So this is, in my view, the key competitive differentiator going forward. So what can we do? Look at SBTi targets, science-based targets, and the criteria is very simple. The target type must be absolute emission reduction, not percentage, absolute. Time frame must be that the minimum level of ambition is to keep the global temperature increase to well below 2 degrees. And there are all kinds of things like that. Prerequisite is that if a company's scope 3 emission are 40% or more of the total scope 1, 2, 3 emission, then you need to have a scope 3 target. So we need to understand these technical aspects. So there are many more things about this which I'm not going to talk to you much about. But just to say that SBTi based climate targets are increasingly the norm for both our peers as well as customers. Over a third of chemical industry has set these targets. So do you want to be a part of that? Because that third is going to become 50% and so on. You don't want to be left out, right? And then our customers, 75% of our key customers are now talking about their climate related targets. So they will be interested in scope 3, which is you and me supplying them, right? So at Clariant, our commitment to sustainability has been long-standing. It's been a key pillar of our strategy for some time. And as a member of the Dow Jones Sustainability Index for the world and Sustainability Index for Europe, we were recognized as one of the most sustainable companies in our sector. And in 2020, the world-renowned Sustainability Index ranked Clariant among the leading companies in its sector, both in DJSI Europe and world, for the 8th year consecutive. So Clariant was also confirmed best in class in innovation management. Why I'm telling you all this is, when we say Clariant, it includes India as well. So what are we doing in India? We are focusing on our scope 1 and scope 2 and scope 3 and looking at how to build those into every new product that we create. Every capex that you do, you must have a sustainability piece to see what are you doing for sustainability. Do you get better or do you get worse? So where does this leave us for this forum today? We could be at a tipping point today of something very big in India, in the chemical industry. As global supply chains look to de-risk the China sourcing strategy, many companies are rushing forward to fill this space. So Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, even Bangladesh is jumping in, and India. So we cannot be left behind, but we need a clear strategy individually for our company. And we can no longer play the role of low-cost supplier depending on labor arbitrage. We have to depend more on R&D, upgrading technology, bringing in automation and so on. And while automation may replace lots of manual labor operations and thus require less labor, there's a long-term play here. Because with automation comes sustainability, reliability for both quality and service. And through this, we should be able to get the growth of higher quality jobs. And that is the reward for India and our economy. And the example for us is China, because they didn't go for this just low cost manufacturing to grow their labor market. They did it with better quality jobs. That's what we must do. So to conclude, I'd say we must invest rapidly in sustainability. What Europe is doing today, the world will do tomorrow. So let's not wait. We must innovate manufacturing processes and bring in more reliability through automation, perhaps digitization where appropriate, keeping sustainability at the heart of our investments. And the third thing is self-regulate. Safety, environment, health, essential for long-term welfare and society. So I urge you to look at your scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions. Look for joining the Science-Based Target Initiative and create a clear sustainability strategy for your companies. Thank you, and Jai Hind.
Excellent. I'm so happy to meet somebody who has more passion than I do. Mishra ji, please make a note. Okay. I thought I was the guy who was accused of being too intense, but Adnan, you take first prize in that. So I'm very happy to hand over the mantle to you. But that was really an excellent, a very quick, lucid presentation. And I think it's taken in a very right sense. I have both of you appear in a good mood. So I'm not going to lose this opportunity to get some takeaways today. And I'm going to also ask you to allow me to provoke a little bit, because I think that we'll get a little brainstorming there. So I think the question, before I do the provoking, I'm going to ask that, if I can call you Mohan, it's Mohan, if you could, share your thoughts on the specific question that I had as to, Adnan has said something which I think pertains to a certain level of company and above, basically. We have 45,000 small and medium scale companies in India. We know that the chemical industry is integrated. There's one accident in one corner of India, the whole industry gets affected. And we've seen that how it goes, basically. And we have many of them. So it almost, as I said, becomes an obligation without taking away anything that Adnan has said. So I'm no way, taking that away. I think that's great. And I got motivated, also to tell my guys to do it. And I'm sure many of our listeners, but we can't ignore the fact and we can't sweep that problem under the carpet that we have 45,000. So Adnan, also to you and to you, Mohan, you have suppliers in India who are middle-sized companies. What do they do? For example, if you buy from Ahmedabad, or all of us do, what should we do with these guys? How should we get them to come into, I don't know what you want to call it, whether it's level -1 or -5 or whatsoever, but how do we really get them to come on board? And I let Mohan take this first, and then Adnan, I come back to you.
So I will probably address it from two angles. Firstly, I will take on the cue from Adnan when he talked about the chemical industry in China and so on. So in the last years, so I slightly disagree with you, Adnan. If you go back about 20-25 years, you had a situation where it was about cost. So the industry built, the Chinese chemical industry built on a cost competition and cost advantage, low cost thing. But then you're right, over a period of time, that they went into the value adds and they have an industry. But what happened in the last 5-7 years? In the last 5-7 years, public pressure, because of accidents, because of pollution, because of gray skies in winter, you had a situation where people started protesting outside chemical parks and chemical industry. And government had no option but to send hundreds and thousands of inspectors all across China and shut down the so-called polluting units which the people are complaining about. This severely disrupted value chains across the world a few years ago. Many of these companies basically shut shop for good because reinvestment into new technologies, updated, they said it's not worth it. I might as well sell my land and retire and can monetize on the land that they have. Then there were another set of companies which said, wow, I see this as an opportunity. Thousands of companies are disappearing across the country. So why don't I invest for the next 20, 30 years and hand over this business to my children and grandchildren? Yeah, these are entrepreneurial thinking in the Chinese context. And I think we don't have to go through the same circuit. I mean, we can leapfrog 1 or 2 generations. You don't have to go through it and spend the next 25 years going through the same cycle, but you can jump that across and say that, well, we are companies, we are responsible companies, and we would like to hand over to our children and grandchildren successful companies which will survive the test of time, and also it will be good for our children to live in those times, because overall you're doing a positive aspect. So it has to happen, like Adnan said. The question is, do you want to go through 25 years of those hardships and difficulty before you are asked to shut down by somebody, and maybe half of the people go bankrupt in that shutdown situation? So do you want to go through all this, or make the responsible choice of directly stepping into something which will be surviving the test of time? So this is one aspect that I would talk about. The second aspect, you asked about suppliers and how do you engage when you are in an environment where there seem to be a number of your potential partners where you do need some kind of due diligence, and that's something as a company we set it up. I mean, we also evolve over time, that we realize, oh my God, I mean, well, what is this? We got to change this. Can we have this? No, we can't. I mean, you need to have audits. You need to have understanding of what your suppliers are doing. What kind of practices do they have? Because eventually, like Adnan said, and I also mentioned that earlier, scope 1, 2, and 3, if you're going to cover the entire cradle to grave kind of situation, then you need to be in a responsible manner also looking at who are your business associates. And I just don't talk about your being followed. So that's something I always encourage my business partners. You know, if you want to do business for a year, fly by night operator, maybe that might work. But if you want to be associated long term, any company or any idea, then investing into the basic fundamentals of sustainability or EHS standards, or how you treat your employees, how you treat, I mean, all these social, environmental aspects, which kind of were nice to have in the past, are no longer an option, because I think supplier audits is not something new today. I mean, practically everybody does it. I get audited by my customers all the time. Even, I mean, my brand alone does not help me. They come to our site, they see what practices we have, and whether what we talk and what we do is actually the same or not. I mean, these guys come and verify this with us. And I think my purchasing organization does that with my suppliers as well. And not just suppliers, but also you have tolling partners and so on and so forth. So I think, as Adnan rightly said, that we are progressing in this direction. I think we have to take a few big steps now to make sure that we bypass those 1 or 2 things of the cycle, which we don't have to learn it the hard way. We don't need so many shutdowns. And I think the fact is, as part of Atmanirbhar Bharat, we will need to create infrastructures or we will need to create chemical clusters. And that's something that's the need of the hour. And over the next 5-10 years, I see us as a country building those clusters and infrastructure. So at a building stage itself, if we put these things into practice, it's a lot easier than to fix it later. Fixing it later is always an expensive affair. So at the conceptualization stage, I mean, whatever you talk about in the old concept, we talked about PCPIRs, but something similar, if you were to say an industry structure, I mean, we always say in various forums, even at the ICC, the last year, we talked about the Jurong Island example, when we had those days when McKinsey talked to us. So learning from Jurong Island. So what do you learn from there? You learn exactly this. How do you make a sustainable chemical park or infrastructure, and how that can survive and be competitive in a place which has neither market nor raw materials? But it is an extremely successful example. Why is it so? Because when you look at it, they have made themselves competitive to a large extent. Sustainability is very much part of their strategy. And I think if we as a country need to be a serious player in the global chemical markets, then we need to make sure that we are taking this into account and making ourselves competitive in the global setup.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mohan, I got a good line for you coming out of both the discussions. I like this line. So what we must do is we must not learn certain things from China and learn certain things from Singapore. So we must learn what not to do from China and what to do from Singapore. I think this is what I take away from, I think you're absolutely right that you got a sustainable model with no raw material, with no market, and everything is out. Fantastic level of supply chain, logistics, shipping, everything that I always wonder how they did it, and if they can do it, why we can't do it. But also you'll have to accept that we talk a lot about it, but we really don't see finally on the ground, unfortunately, reality. And okay, we have to keep on going. And the cluster development is a topic which is now being discussed from a long time, but unfortunately really not there for various reasons. Adnan, you want a quick word on this, toning down, looking at another canvas and not your canvas, and even Mohan's canvas, which is a very nice canvas, and not nice, but a different canvas, and a smaller one, which is a little bit dirtier and muddier, and how to really advise our suppliers, our industry who are smaller, how first to change the thinking is one story, but from a practical aspect, what are the three things, if you have to enumerate, what would you ask them to do on a practical basis, on a very, things which are achievable? Because I think we all need to agree that we can't hold the same standards that we have, in Europe for them in the first phase itself. You'll have to kind of filter through and get the big holes filled up and then go, you can't have a zero tolerance there. It's always a problem. So what is your view on that?
I'll tell you. So let me just first sidestep and share with you, because you were asking what do you do with your suppliers and so on, our raw material suppliers. So we have something called Together for Sustainability, TFS, which I'm sure Mohan is familiar with. And that is where we are working with our suppliers, and we are trying to, there's a little bit of auditing as well. There's a little bit of hand-holding as well. Some suppliers are way ahead and, they don't need any hand-holding. Some do. Where we're looking at various aspects of their environmental record, their environmental performance, their safety performance, sustainability, and so on. So that is in a small way something that we are doing. And so there it's not just price led. So if you were somebody who was TFS compliant, and if you were at a slight premium to somebody else who's giving me the same product but not TFS compliant, I would go with you. So that's one part. Okay, now we're talking about what are the 2 or 3 key things. So I agree with you that nobody is saying that you go to, like we went to Bharat 6 in a hurry right now, right? Which I think was the absolute right thing to do, but it was quite painful for the automotive industry, right? To jump to Bharat 6. So can we do a Bharat 6 equivalent on sustainability for the chemical industry? I don't think you can do it very quickly, but you have to know what that Bharat 6 for our industry is. So the first step would be, we need to understand where do we want to go in terms of sustainability. Doesn't matter how big or small you are. You must now learn what is scope 1, what is scope 2, what is scope 3. You must know what are science-based targets, and you must know what is the target that is achievable, which I would like to set. See, unless you have a score, when you come into bat in the second innings, you don't know whether I need to hit 328 or I need to score 300 or I need to score. Yesterday, those of you who saw that outstanding cricket game, having that score in front of you is something that you can work with. So the first part is put up that scoreboard and create that score. So for that, you need some skills, you need some help. So go ahead and get that help. That would be the first part. Okay. I think the second part is then to have a roadmap of how you get there. So the worst thing is when the small guy says, this is not for small, this is only for big companies. That's bollocks. Because all of us breathe the same air, drink the same water, right? So we have the same needs for our country to clean up. As Mohan talked about the gray skies, all of us want blue skies and clean air. So it doesn't matter how tall or short you are, or what your income is, or which part of the country you live in. It doesn't matter, right? And likewise, for all our industries, this is a need, right? So the first part is understand where you want to go. Second part is you need to have a roadmap. And then the third part is that you need to have a strategy which is very simple. For example, every capex that I put in, I will put profitability. I want to know my payback. I also want to know impact on sustainability. When I hire somebody, whatever job I'm hiring him in, I will put in one part about his knowledge about sustainability, so that if I get somebody who has a little bit more knowledge about sustainability, maybe a little bit less about the content that I wanted him, I'll bring that guy because he's going to bring in this knowledge for me. So, when you start looking at when I talked about strategy being one of our pillars, you got to know how are you going to place that strategic intent on sustainability. Your R&D projects should have sustainability at the heart of it. So if it has sustainability, pass the project. If it has nothing on sustainability, stall it. Prioritize like that. So these three things, I think, if you can start doing. I don't think you need to be a big company. You don't need to have deep pockets, but this will give you a head start, and it will tell you how big the task is, and what resource you need behind it. Does that answer your question, Ravi?
To be honest, partly we still have a problem, because what happens? No, I agree. The answer was, I think, it covered a lot. My problem still is, and you know that as well. We do have and that's the problem. We do have a policy of encouraging SMEs. So we have that officially in the country, and which is fine, which is really the bulk of the employers and the bulk of the industries. And finally, when we see, and if you look, Adnan, if I may make you recall, even in our executive committee meetings of ICC, we do get this, don't we? That look, and these are not even as small as what I'm talking about. These are also, there are companies who say, look, on responsible care implementation, we really don't have the funds you guys have, and it's difficult. When we try to make something which should be a no-brainer, why should even responsible care be something that you have to push somebody to do? It should be basically an integral part of a setting up of a company, basically. But unfortunately, what happens is, and to give you a quick example, if you know the initiative of ZDHC, zero discharge of hazardous chemicals, and from the dyes part of it, if you look, the famous dirty laundry report of Greenpeace, which was there in, from China. And really what happens, if you really start analyzing why finally everyone is forced to do it, and that is one question, which we are not going to get an answer today, but I'll leave it with you, that if you look at some person, Levi's has a pressure that they are not going to sell jeans because the people who are going to buy jeans would rather buy from another company who uses dyes coming from ZDHC. And if that is not going to be there, there's a pressure on the retailer, and then that transfers down right up to the dye manufacturer. And the issue is, in India, I think if you don't get the general stakeholder, the society at large, not only complaining, but saying, look, I'm going to rather pay 20% more for a product, which is clean and which is responsibly made, and then you get the back effect. Now, I know that, this is quite a drastic example, but this is the way that it's going to come. It has to come from all sides. It has to come from top down. We still would have challenges with our smaller companies.
Ravi, it's not drastic. What you're saying is not drastic. That's the issue. So, I've interrupted you because the thing is like this, that it is not about being competitive. It's that somebody is doing something that's not acceptable. If you're small scale, it doesn't mean you can put toxic waste in a river. It's not acceptable. So you can't say, but I don't have the money to treat it, so I'm going to chuck it in the river. That's not acceptable. That's what I say about our self-regulation. We have to. So if you cannot afford that business, don't do that business. Do something else. So I'll give you an example. In paints, lead was removed from paints in the 1970s in America. In the 1970s.
Yeah.
It has been regulated in India only about 10 years ago. There were lots of companies that had lead in their products. So I'm asking you, are my children less important, and is their health of less value than a child in America? To me, it's not. So if lead is hazardous to my child in India, why should I allow it to go in paints only because there's a cost competitiveness of somebody in industry? It's not acceptable. So this is where self-regulation comes in. I think it's about education also. It's about awareness. And we have to get out of this mindset that, cheap and cheerful is acceptable, even though it's environmentally harmful. It's not acceptable. So how do we bring that about? And there are ways that small industry can be profitable and can make great products and do it in a safe way as well. By staying away from, practices which are non-sustainable, which are environmentally not acceptable. It's not acceptable to say that, look, I won't put safety things because my labor can get injured, I'll just get another guy. No. Why? Are you motivated to work in a company where your health and welfare is not important? I'm not.
Adnan, you're preaching to the preacher. Okay, you're preacher. I'm the priest here, so you don't have to sell that to me at all. We have the same concept here. The only question is, I don't know, maybe I'm not going to use the word cynical, but too many years of trying and not getting enough traction. But we have to keep on doing it. And,
Look at the seatbelt. Look at the seatbelt example in India. It hasn't worked with helmets, but it's worked with seatbelts, right? With seatbelts, somebody had to clamp down heavy. Till then, people said, but our cars don't have it. I can't fit it. It costs too much. All kinds
that's a good example, sir. That's a good example. The seatbelt story, again, if you look at India, you get in the urban centers a very good traction, but in the other centers, you don't get it. So that's really one of the...
Is their life less valuable?
No, it is not. It is not. It is not. It's the attitude. It's the philosophy. Anyhow, I think we will take it offline. Last word, a minute from you, Mohan, then we can we keep time hygiene there.
So, I mean, between Adnan and myself, we don't seem to have any disagreement on most topics today, which is a good sign. We are totally aligned on these things. And I also fully agree with this sustainability or standards being kind of mandated. And what I see, or if I fast forward a few years, and even in India, it's happening world over, but it will happen in India as well, that consumers will start demanding it. Yeah, and it will come from. Today, if you ask my kids or that generation, when they go to a shop and they buy whatever, it doesn't matter which brand they are buying, but when they buy, and if they know that this has been done by child labor or they will not buy that stuff. Yeah, so they take those conscious decisions, and if they have to pay a little bit more to buy something which is certified, labeled, you can go to a grocery store and you can see the example of organic food, by the way. So the consumption of organic food has gone up. Now, is it really good or bad? We don't get into that discussion. But the fact of the matter is, a certain level of branding and saying that this is good, this is sustainable, will have an impact. And now coming to our industry, that's precisely something which transparency on product carbon footprints and if you have to label your product and say that my product has X emissions and X, and which is all required in the long run, because you will need to be part of a global supply chain which measures one against the other, and probably there will at one point in time be a system which is harmonized, because today every country also has its own system of doing these things. But in a harmonized way, if that is required in global supply chain, I think even for SMEs to survive in that context where public pressure will force them to be transparent about this data, and this will be difficult to survive long term without it, is my take.
Yeah. No, fully agreed. And only thing I object to is that you included yourself and Adnan in the philosophy of thought. I'm also in the same thought line. However, I would like to really provoke a discussion, because I think that's in the back of your minds as well. How does it really happen? And I completely agree. I'm the one who's touting from the rooftops and saying this. I only hope that we see it. The question also is acceleration. If my next generation is going to come after 10, 15 years, how really to accelerate this process in a way that we've seen it sooner, and we should not forget that our children also represent the top 20% in the country and not the bottom 80, and you'll also have to get them as a traction into the whole story. But guys, you have been fantastic. Thank you very much, Adnan and Mohan. I think we couldn't have had a better discussion, and would love to continue this sometime offline again and get some more takeaways. But thank you very much for coming, and Mishra ji, I hand over to you.
Pleasure.
Well, thank you. It has been a great discussion. So once again, thank you to you. Thank you to Mr. Krishnaman Narayan and Mr. Adnan Ahmed for coming and joining. And as a matter of fact, frankly, as you mentioned, that more discussion needs to be done offline now to take the things forward. So we talk about it, but then subsequently do something to reach out to that group that you're referring to, Ravi. So thank you very much, all of you, for joining. We'll sign off over here. We have a short break, and then we get off to our next session where we have the DG of CEFIC, And I think some of the things that you're talking about, he's going to talk about the Green Deal, that the big thing that EU is implementing, especially for the chemical industry. So thank you very much, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.